How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm just,
How's
living.
just living, if we can call it that? How is your lockdown life?
It's kind of I was on my letterbox trying to see how many movies I've watched since quarantine because the last movie I saw in theater was The Way Back with Ben Affleck,
Hmm.
and I think I clocked in at like 71 or 72 movies since quarantine hit. And just like that's a lot.
Oh, I'm way more than that. No, the last movie I saw in theaters, I saw an advanced screening of Onward on February 29th. It was on Leap Day, and I have not been to a theater since. But my overall movie watching has actually decreased because when I was working, because now I'm home and I have a wife and a baby, and it's like they deserve my attention.
Yeah.
And when I'm at work, like it's very isolating. And so, before I could watch, like just sitting at the office, I could watch 2 or 3 movies a day while getting work done. And now it's like I watch like a movie a day. So I'm still watching a lot of movies, but it's dropped a little bit. My viewing habits have changed with the virus.
Yeah, well it's kind of sad is that the movies that have been released on VOD have not been like the, the most to look forward to.
Yeah.
I mean, mediocre, maybe just a little bit. I mean, I saw Relic on VOD, and I think that's like the last movie I saw that I actually paid for to rent. And I didn't mind that
Mhm.
movie. I thought it was pretty solid for a horror film. But
I think the only thing I've seen that has been released since everything shut down was I saw Trolls World Tour, which it was okay. It wasn't as good as Trolls Holiday, which I think is one of the ballsiest things to be released by DreamWorks Animation. It is absolutely insane. So it wasn't as exciting as that, which is a bit of a bummer. But I think it's the only like newer thing. I did watch the Lego Shazam, which was like direct to video. That was fun.
dude, like watching your letterbox activity, you watch like the most like not absurd, but it's like the most like how do I explain it? Like the most least expected cartoon animated stuff where I'm like, how do you even know that exists related to like
I
this?
Yeah, well, and the thing too, because it's harder writing reviews when I'm at home and there's people there. So I'm consistently like a month behind in what I'm writing.
Yeah.
So that there's weirder things I've watched in the last month. I rewatched Spawn today. Did you ever see that? The 1997.
Oh, Todd McFarlane.
Yeah.
I remember that on HBO like when I was super little, but I don't recall. I
Oh
have no
man,
recollection of it.
it is a ride. It is a ride. It's not a good ride, but it's an experience. Yeah, no, I feel like I'm a pretty eclectic. I don't really like to limit myself to one style of movie or like limit myself to just good movies or uh yeah, but it's been fun.
I
It's
mean,
been
I try to be like kind of broad like that too. Like if a movie's bad, I'll like try to sit through it all the way. And it's I don't know, that's how I was with Old Guard. I thought Old Guard was not the greatest movie, and I forced myself all the way through it.
I did like when you bought one of those like horror like 30 film box sets at Walmart and we're burning through all of those. I lived for that commentary. And you're commenting on all of these movies. And wasn't there one that like Alexis worked on? Wasn't like Handy Dandy in there?
Yeah, so she actually this like she let me know she was back in Utah because she's always out and about
Yeah,
exploring in different
everywhere.
areas. And she's like, I just got done work on this movie. It's on Prime. Like, we should like meet up and watch it. and like catch up. I'm like, yeah, totally. Like, what's this movie you worked on? And dude, it was campy. I mean, you get what you pay for. Obviously, it's not like expensive on Prime, but like also the.
Yeah.
But
No,
she was like, it was kind of an interesting experience though, because like she was like telling me like all the stuff that went on behind the scenes, you know, and like adding more context to like certain scenes that were being shot, and like how she was a script supervisor, and she's like, that changed because of me. That I recommend they change that, and they ignored me.
Well, and it's always so interesting, like knowing, which you don't really get with movies very often. You don't really get to see, like, oh, I know exactly what went on behind the scenes. And when you do find out, it's always interesting,
Yeah.
right? And then it becomes quoted all the time, like in Two Towers when Viggo Mortensen kicks the helmet and screams, and you're like, oh, he broke his toe doing that, and it like changes that scene. But man, like I've worked on stuff that I'm like, oh man. The final product, I'm like, this, looking at it objectively, I'm like, this is not very good. But looking at it through the lens of everything that happened behind the scenes, I'm like, it turned out fine.
Yeah.
All things considered.
Yeah, there's always context that has to be given to projects.
Yeah.
But all right, let's have you introduce yourself, sir. A face to the voice and a voice to the face.
Face to the voice. Are we putting my face on this? That's weird. So, hi, my name is Brogan Bouwhuis. I'm a writer of lots of different things. Often I have the banner of Robot Eats Dinosaur so that people don't have to learn how to spell or pronounce my last name. They can usually do one or the other, but it's just not fair to expect both. So that is me. So I've done movies and comics and niche journalism and radio ads and all sorts of fun stuff.
You're well-rounded in the terms of writing for different mediums.
Trying to pay rent, I think, is the correct term for that.
Do you write full-time then? Is that your full-time gig?
I do. So I was freelancing. So I was working at a call center and started doing some. I was working in a call center and I had started doing some freelance writing projects. I worked on a TV show. Extinct on BYU TV, which you can watch now for free at byutv.org/extinct. And that led to some other projects. I was working in a call center and kind of just doing this stuff on the side. And then the call center was raided by the FBI and we stopped getting paid. So I left there and started doing more freelancing as I was trying to find another job, and ended up just kind of moving into freelancing full time. A lot of marketing work because that pays significantly better. The first commercial I wrote, it was like a 3-minute commercial. It never got made. And I made more than I did working on an entire season of television. So I was like, and it was a non-union show. Otherwise I would have gotten paid more. If it was produced somewhere outside of Utah. But I ended up earning more from like this commercial that didn't even get made than I did from this whole season of TV. And I'm like, oh, this is helpful. So I did a lot of marketing work and then kind of do the fun things when I can get them. So I've been writing full time. That was 2016, I think, 2017, somewhere around there. And then when I graduated, I took a in-house marketing gig just so I'd have health insurance when my daughter was born. And so now I have a writing day job, and then all the other fun writing that I also do. So I write a lot. It's a lot of words.
And it's probably a different mindset for each medium that you're kind of writing for, right?
Yeah. Well, and it just depends, because some things are, a lot of it is collaborative. I'm lucky enough to do a lot of collaborative writing. It's still very isolating because I'm sitting in a room typing on a keyboard and not talking to anyone. But then I like send it off to someone and they work on it and they send it back and they're like, this part sucks and you suck, do better. And I'm like, okay. They're way nicer than that, but it's so it's very collaborative, and which is nice. And it's kind of the thing that drew me to like screenwriting and comics as opposed to like novels where I don't have to talk to anyone, but I also have to do like everything and it's exhausting. So I it is interesting to see how different things can be, and also how different the mindsets things can be. Because there's a lot of, because when you're writing, when you're writing a marketing campaign for a company, there are a lot of people with their fingers in that pie, and a lot of them like don't really want to be there. And when you're writing like a film or a comic, like everyone tends to be excited. There's very few people phoning it in. So the main difference, I think, is just the attitudes between the people that are participating. And typically, the less people are getting paid, the more passionate they are, which is funny how that works out. But it's pretty good.
And how long have you been running comics for?
So the first comic I wrote, I think was 2016, 2017. And I got really lucky. So the hard part about getting into comics is that there are, if you can't draw, which I cannot, I am not good at art in any way, shape, or form. It's a lot harder to break into because you need someone that can do that. And so it often, if you want to get someone to make it, you have to meet people, you have to find someone that you can trust, and then you have to pay them money, which is expensive. But there was a comic anthology called Strange Romance that put out a call for pitches and was like, hey, we're going to match. We'll match writers with artists, which was very exciting. So I sent in a pitch to that, and that was accepted. And they brought me in to work with an artist and also a writer who's very all around talented comic creator named Melissa Capriglione. And we made a story. So that we wrote that, I think, in 2017, and then it was released in February of 2018. And kind of since then, I've just put out some short stories, sometimes 1 page, sometimes like 10 pages. It varies, but nothing like grand and vast yet. But been doing that for about 3 years.
It's always fun.
It is. It is fun. It's super interesting because you never know. And that's the thing I love about comics and film too. Like film is like this too. As me as a screenwriter who has no interest in directing, you never really know what you are going to get back. But with comics especially, like you send them words on a page and you have no idea what they're going to send back to you. And it's so exciting. The last thing I wrote was a short story called Never Eat Your Heroes that is about meeting celebrities, like the anxiety of meeting a celebrity combined with the anxiety of surviving the zombie apocalypse. And it's just about, meeting Paul Rudd after the world has fallen apart. And everything I said, I just sent off this like short script to the artist Lane Lloyd, and everything he sent back to me was like beyond my wildest imagination. And every time with a comic, it's always, you send them a thing, they send you back something completely different than you expected, but it's wonderful. So
is Paul Rudd one of your favorite actors then?
Paul Rudd is just a very handsome man. I have a lot of feelings about Paul Rudd. He is my number one celebrity crush. He is a good actor, but also I just like his face.
He seems like such a good down to earth dude in all of his interviews.
Which is fascinating because if I hadn't aged in 30 years, I would let that go straight to my head. Like I would immediately be like, yeah, no, I'm the greatest. Like, no, and he just seems like a super nice guy. Everything I've heard about working with him, everything I've heard makes him sound super nice.
Yeah, and I saw on Facebook that he has a gag with a talk show host where he'll say, here's the latest clip of a movie, and then it's from a different, like,
it's
old
Mac
school
and
movie.
Me every single time.
Which I think is funny. I like knowing that that's a gag, and like the talk show host probably know it's going to be a gag. Like, I think it's fun. So
yeah, it's great. And with the one I like when he was doing Ant-Man, because it's Conan O'Brien every single time. And he was doing when he was Ant-Man, Conan O'Brien was like, at least Marvel's not going to let you do this. And then it was Ant-Man edited onto, it was Ant-Man edited onto the clip from Mac and Me, which is the movie was made as like a McDonald's commercial. And they saw E.T. and they're like, E.T. was big for Reese's. Let's make another movie about aliens for McDonald's, which is an interesting approach to the creative process.
So you've seen the movie?
I have seen the movie. I have not seen it all at once. Like I've watched enough clips of it that I've seen the entire thing, but I've never been like, I'm going to sit down and devote a full 90 minutes of my life to watching this all at once, which I one day I should do. One day I will get around to it. But in the meantime, I am not.
Go back to the comic book writing though. So you were saying that like you write words on paper. Like, do you have to structure it a certain way for the artist to know like when the new panel is, or?
So yeah, so writing a comic script, and it is a bit tricky in that there is no set format for writing a comic book script. Screenplays, when you're writing a screenplay, it's down as like, this is the font, this is the margins, everything is hammered out exactly. This is how you do it. There isn't a method like that for comic books. And so there's a couple of different ways you can approach it. There's one that famously called the Marvel method, which was when Stan Lee was writing like 12 books at once, where he would just outline the issue and let the artist come up with everything. Closest I've ever come to that was a script I did called The Milk, which was an anthology called Corpus. And I co-wrote it with Morgan Renner, the artist. We wrote it together in just like an outline format. And then I went and I divided. I'm like, okay, like we knew this is how many pages the story we had, because the editor was like, you have this many pages. And we're like, great. So I'm like, first page, this happens, this happens, this happens. And I would line out like some bits of dialogue and I go page by page. For the most part, it is divided up. This page, this many panels, this panel is this panel is this. So it's very much a concrete what I'm sending over as far as what is happening. And there's room, depending on the artist and how comfortable I am with them and how comfortable they are with me. There is sometimes the possibility where I'll be like, this is 5 panels. And they're like, I can make it 3 panels. And it's like, great. So there is an issue of just trust and trusting your collaborator with that, and being willing to there's some push and pull in a good way of your understanding of the story you're creating and their understanding of art as a medium. But typically, in most cases, how I write and how I know a lot of comic writers write is you have your script, it's breaking down page by page, panel by panel. This is what's happening. So you're kind of giving them the pieces and they're putting together the puzzle.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Dude, that's cool. I always wondered like how exactly was laid out, like I don't know. Because like I'm not an artist myself either, but I also think comic books are almost like a storyboard, almost, like
it essentially is. It's interesting because each panel is capturing one fixed moment in time.
Right. And
so there's a thing, if you have someone doing 3 things, you have to do that in 3 different panels. Like you can't, and so you do have to be very selective. Because there's, writing a screenplay, I could have someone come in and they walk into a room, they like pick up a glass of water, they drink the whole thing, and they walk out of the room. And you can do that in a screenplay, and it's, you can get that in a line or two, and on screen, it's going to take a few seconds. on a comic page, you have to have them walking in, you have to have them picking up the glass of water, drinking the glass of water, putting it down, leaving. So you have to be very selective in how you are approaching the story and what exact moments in time that you're doing. And then it's complicated because then you have things where you can kind of fudge that a little bit. Like if you have people talking, you can have multiple exchanges of dialogue in a panel. So it's not quite just one moment at a time because you have, this multiple instances of conversation over this fixed moment in time. And so it is similar to storyboarding. Storyboarding, you're kind of like capturing like the whole scene and how it's going to move. And this is just still pictures giving the illusion of movement.
Well, I know because I'm not a huge comic book fan. Like I'm not a huge reader of comic books, and I'm pretty critical of superhero movies to an extent. But I've seen some comparisons where like if there's a big moment from like a comic book, like the Avengers or whatever, they'll take a lot of inspiration from that and try to recreate that one panel as much as they can, like on the screen. I think it's kind of a cool comparison.
And it's fascinating to catch that. And I know one that really, I know Captain America's Civil War, that moment with Iron Man and Cap going at it, and there's like the blast to the shield, and it's a moment where time just sort of freezes, and it's this comic panel. But it's always it's a very temporary, and then it goes back to the movie. So they're very different, in seeing the ways in which they intersect comic books and movies, because they're very different mediums. Seeing those moments is always fascinating to me. I think, have you seen the Sin City movies, Robert Rodriguez and Frank Miller?
Yeah.
I think Sin City, I don't think they're the best comic book movies, but I think they're the best movies as far as capturing the experience of reading a comic book. Like it's not the same. It's not like you're watching a regular movie. It very much is like you are.
It's stylized.
Yeah, it's very stylized in a way that feels like you are sitting there with the paper in your hand reading the book. And so I'm always fascinated with that transition between mediums. And I mean, in anything, not just with comic books to film, but anytime you adapt something to a different medium, each medium has different, there's different settings and stipulations and things that work in one setting but don't work in another. And so I'm always fascinated to see how that adaptation is made. And I mean, sometimes it's handled better than others. There's plenty of times where people take a book or a comic and they turn it into a film and they copy it like straight over, don't change anything, and it just doesn't work. So it's very, I don't know, adaptation is fun. I have a lot of respect for the people that do it well.
Did you ever take the class in college for that?
No, they did not teach it while I was there.
They taught it like I think my last year there, and I almost took it, but
yeah, they did not teach it. They ended up teaching the short film class, like 4 semesters in a row. So I had a bummer of a time with that because I really wanted to take it. Yeah, and there's things that I'm like, I want to adapt this. If there's one thing I do in my career, if there's like one thing I accomplish, I want to adapt Nick Spencer's Bedlam from a comic to a television series. And so like I desperately wanted to take that course. It was never offered while I was there. At one point they're like, oh, we're gonna postpone it until this semester, so we're putting the short films, and they're like, oh, they're going on sabbatical, so we're doing short films again. So I took that class. I wrote a lot of short films, which is good. I think more people should write short films. So
short films are, I think, if I remember correctly, I think it was one of the the twins there? Because I mean, for some backstory for the listeners, you and I know each other through college, like
Yeah.
and through Alexis of all people.
Through Alexis. We met through Alexis.
Yeah.
And then had a class together when
Yep.
my first semester at the U and your last semester at the U. And I was like, oh, hey, we met at Alexis's house that one time. So
Yeah.
that
That's a backstory for us.
That's
But
the backstory.
I think one of the twins, like one of the professors, they said that creating short films is sometimes even harder than a feature film because you have such limited time to convey a story.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to utilize everything that you utilize in a feature, though.
And they're so different. That's the thing. I don't think, and I mean, there's some shorter features and some longer short films that kind of blur those lines.
Yeah.
But the experience of creating a 5-minute film is so different than the experience of creating a feature. And so I absolutely, one of my pet peeves, Letterboxd especially, because I mean, Letterboxd is fantastic because it's a social media website minus the social component. Like, I am super active on that site. I don't talk to anyone. It's fantastic. But there's still like a lot of attitudes that pop up enough for you to see them. And one of them, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, short films like aren't real. They're not real movies. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because there's so much work that has to be put into making a short story. And it is different than telling long form work. And so there are absolutely, I mean, there are people who are great at making short films that move to making a feature-length film and don't do very well. But just like there's people that are fantastic at making feature-length films that don't do great with shorts. So I love short films. I think they take a lot of work, and I'm glad that there was a short film writing class. I wish that there was more writing classes at the University of Utah. I took almost every writing course offered by the university, almost every creative writing course, and I was there for 2 years. And there was like one class I didn't get in that was taught during my time there.
What class was that?
There was in the English department, there was a writing young adult fiction workshop that was very competitive. You had to go through, get all these steps to get into the class. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need to do that.
Yeah, I think I took poetry and I took writing fiction as like electives. And then I focused more on screenplay stuff with like Trent and Paul. Mostly Paul. Trent was my last one. And with Trent's class, he said that you had to submit 30 minutes of a screenplay, right? For a final. But I had Knife Adventure already written as a short film from years before. And so I just fixed it up to his standards. And then we ended up filming that like after I graduated.
Yeah, I remember you coming in and you had this script and I was like, oh man, like you did a great job with this. How did you do it? And you're like, oh, I had written it before. And I was so mad. I was so mad at you. My experience, so there are a few failures that have like changed how I approach writing. And that have changed my approach to writing. And that class was one of them. Trent's class. Not that I failed the class. Like I got like an A- or something, which is fine. So it's not like I failed the class, but the experience. So backstory. The class is taught by writer-director Trent Harris, who is probably most well known for Ruben and Ed, which is getting a Blu-ray release. Sony just announced, which
I'll buy it.
I think is fantastic. Nobody ever saw that coming. They didn't even give it like a DVD release. All the DVDs are ones that Trent makes himself.
Yeah,
like he burns his own DVDs. And has been selling bootlegs on his website since there's no actual like DVD release of this film. So, and he wanted a 30-minute, but he wanted like a standalone 30-minute script, which I'm like, that's impossible. How do you do that? I'm like, that's too long to be a short. That's too short to be a long. It doesn't. And so I really struggled to fit a story into this 30 minutes. And I was just like, I was just having a really rough go of it. And the script that I did for that 30-minute like wasn't very good. And I was talking to Trent about it. I'm like, well, 30 minutes just doesn't work. And he shut me up because I'm a big fan of the Twilight Zone. And he's like, every episode of the Twilight Zone is a 30-minute standalone film. And I was like, oh, dang. And so I was just like, I just need to write a Twilight Zone episode. And it would have been fine. But I was coming into it. I'm like, this is too hard. It can't be done. And then he brought in actors to read our scripts, and the pages that I brought in to read was just like, they brought in all of these actual actors. Like, he paid them to come into our class and perform our scripts. And I'm like, here's a 6-page monologue. And it's, the whole thing was like, there's this giant monologue and then a dude gets stabbed in the throat. And the actors after this were like, yeah, this kind of feels like a waste of our time. Do you not remember this? No, so run it in. And then they're like, I mean, it's all right, but if you're trying to read for actors, like, you probably want to give actors something to do. And I was like, oh, so that was a defining failure that changed how I approach writing.
Well, and I took his class, and I took all 3 years of Paul's class, and I had to do an independent study under Paul, and then I had to do a continuing ed under him just to keep taking the class over and over again.
Oh, and I'm still in the continuing ed.
Oh no, it's great, and I wish I could afford to be back in it, but duty calls when the pandemic hits. But Paul has a different way of approaching scripts than Trent does, but Trent has like a very much more straightforward, whereas Paul is all about finding your voice, and like once you apply the both and like try to find the happy medium, like you realize that like, dude, screenwriting is like such a class that I think everybody in film needs to take.
Well, and especially because, I mean, you have people that want to be directors that don't know how to read a script.
Yeah.
And I think we're underserving. I think one thing that is underrepresented in the world of filmmaking is the joy of aspects of filmmaking that aren't being a director, because it feels like the main emphasis is on directing. And when everyone wants to be a director, there's a lot of hands not making light work. You have a lot of people that want to be in charge, and like some people, it's so great to see someone that is super excited about something like color grading, and they're like, I love color grading. And then that if you work with them, like you are getting you're the best color grading. You're going to get the best. And same when someone is excited about lighting, like you are going to get great work from them. And when everyone's like, I want to be a director, I'm just holding this boom mic so I can be a director later. So I wish that people learned more about other elements of filmmaking, because there are so many exciting things to do that aren't directing.
Yeah.
I mean, directing is great. I think people should learn about directing, but there's so many exciting things to do that are not directing that I feel kind of just gets left out, because it's like, oh, you have to get a basic knowledge of lighting in order to be a director. I'm like, there's so much you can do with lighting. I wish that there were a bigger emphasis on the elements of creativity beyond just getting to be in charge of things.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think one of my biggest joys was helping out. Do you know Taylor Deuce?
I do not.
You do not. I was helping him out on a project with Jonathan Nelson. I don't know if you know him, and Dario. Dario was working on this. I don't know if you know Dario. Yeah. They reached out to me to be like the second AD, and I'm like, I don't know what that is, but sure, like whatever, like I'll be part of it. And being involved in that, because basically I had to like take Dario's spot when he wasn't there to cover his spot. And so like I was learning AD stuff and helping out with the DP, you know. But the more you're on set, you realize that the AD and DP are never on the same page. And there's like this weird chemistry between them where like there's respect, but the DP wants all the time in the world to set up the shots. AD's like, no, we have to stay on time. Like we have to move on, you know? And being able to experience that, I don't know. I had fun with that. The one thing I regret not taking in school was actually cinematography and sound.
I wish that I had taken more filmmaking classes. So I got my associates. Well, so I changed my major a whole bunch of times. I went to a bunch of different schools, had no idea what I was doing with my life, dropped out of college, ended up working on a TV show, and then was like, oh, hey, I like this. I'll do this now. And so I went back to school, but I went to Salt Lake Community College and got my associate's degree because I had spent 6 years at school. I was pretty close to getting it. And then I went to the U, so I only had 2 years. And I'm focused pretty much exclusively on the writing classes, both in the film department and the theater department and English and everything. So I didn't take that many film production classes as beyond the basics. And I think it would have been fun to get more hands-on time with sound and with editing. I would have liked to do that. I mean, I still can learn those things now. It's just that no one's going to yell at me if I don't show up. So it's harder to push myself.
Yeah.
But
I took After Effects, and I still don't know After Effects. So it's like Photoshop for video, but like more complicated.
My thing with After Effects, I'm blown away with the GIFs that some people make. When it's not even like a video, it's like this is a 6-second muted cartoon. And people are like, yeah, I put 30 hours into this in After Effects, and it looks incredible. I'm also like, this is like 3 meg. And it's... Wait,
they created a GIF in After Effects?
Oh, yeah. No, there's a big internet community of GIF enthusiasts that will put in a bunch of work in like After Effects to make a GIF. And
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'll get like some video and I'll go on Photoshop and like add some text. And I'm like, done. I am proud of this effort. I'm like, here's my 30-hour GIF.
Yeah, because I didn't know you can actually put video in Photoshop until, do you know Peter McKinnon? Like, do you follow his stuff on YouTube?
That sounds very familiar. Yes.
I'd recommend everybody check his stuff out. He's really cool. But he was talking about how you could put moving images in a photo. And like the example he used was him pouring coffee. So you take the photo of pouring the coffee, or you actually take the video of it, then you take a screen, like a still of it, and then you just mask out the coffee stream so it looks like it's continuously pouring.
Okay. So that's how they do that.
Yeah. And I'm like, I didn't know you could do that with video in Photoshop. I had no idea.
No, people are so clever, and I'm just blown away constantly. And then someone's just like, oh, this is how I do this thing. And I'm like, how is this? What is this? What you could accomplish if I wasn't spending all of my time like researching Godzilla trivia? This is incredible.
Do you have all the Godzilla movies?
I have every Godzilla movie, not including the Godzilla Earth trilogy, the anime, because outside of Japan, it's distributed exclusively on Netflix, so it's not available for home video. But other than that, I own every Godzilla movie on Blu-ray.
What'd you think of the latest one?
The latest American one, King of the Monsters?
Yeah.
I feel like I have a lot of thoughts. I feel like it would not have been very hard to make that movie a masterpiece. I feel like there was way too many characters. I feel like if you composited like 8 of the characters into 3 characters,
Yeah.
it would have been a lot easier to follow, because when people were talking, it was just boring and I didn't care. I think the action in that is some of the most visually pleasing spectacle to come out of a Godzilla film.
Yeah.
So I wish it had been better. I still overall was pleased with it just because it looked so great. But the story could have used some work. I'm hopeful for Godzilla versus Kong, because I think Kong Skull Island was fantastic. I think that was it wasn't the best film to be released that year, but I think it was certainly the most fun. So I'm hoping that some of that will transfer over, but I feel like the Legendary's Godzilla films have had a little trouble finding their footing. The first one was way too much people and not enough Godzilla, and then the next one was it was a lot of Godzilla but not quite enough people, not strong enough of characters, and so I am hoping that they'll kind of meet a nice middle ground.
What I find interesting is that Godzilla, the first one, that was directed by Gareth Edwards,
the 2014.
Yeah, who was an independent filmmaker who did Monsters.
Yeah.
Which is a good film. I mean, that's a pretty solid independent film.
But it's a monster movie where you don't see the monster.
Yeah, no, I mean, you have a point there. And like the Kong Skull Island, that was done by another independent filmmaker originally, who did, was it Kings of Summer? Or
Kings of Summer.
Yeah, which is a pretty solid independent drama, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then or Godzilla King of Monsters, or the new one, the newest one to be released, is done by Michael Dougherty, who's known for Trick or Treat, which is another independent horror film.
Oh, yeah.
And the next one is going to be done by Adam Weingart, who is another independent mumblecore horror filmmaker. And so it's like they have this trend of hiring these independent filmmakers to make these big monster budget films.
Oh, and it's not even just monster. You look at, before Colin Trevorrow was bought on to do Jurassic World, he had done Safety Not Guaranteed, which was this indie time travel romantic comedy. And no, it's the same. All the superhero movies have done it. It is a great time to be a white dude in cinema. I think it's definitely, you have like one successful indie film and they're like, great, here's $200 million. And I mean, awesome for me. I think we should probably open that up a little bit more.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of indie filmmakers being handed the reins to massive film franchises.
Yeah, because I know. So I think Ryan Coogler is another independent film guy, right? Like Fruitvale Station, and then he got Creed, and then he got Black Panther, which got nominated for some stuff and won. I believe actually won some awards. Correct?
Yeah,
Black Panther.
Yeah, it got multiple Academy Awards, I'm pretty sure.
It's cool, dude. Independent films saving franchises.
Yeah.
But going on to that, though, I mean, with COVID-19, with all these theaters trying to like forcefully open or not open, right? The big question is like, how are these theaters going to survive? And a lot of people think it's going to be Hollywood, but I'm like, no. Independent film. It's always been the thing to like save film in general.
And I think the dynamic is changing because it's being forced to change. Because I think studios for a long time were content that no matter what they put out, people would give them money.
Yeah.
And then sometimes people were like, wait, I don't want to give you money for this. And so you have these movies that cost a lot of money that just lose so much money. And I think the idea of uh, just working on a lot of lower budget films has been, which is why Blumhouse right now is so successful. And I mean, started out with, Paranormal Activity had a $15,000 budget.
And look how much it made.
Had a $15,000 budget. Biggest return on investment in film history. Also premiered at Slamdance, by the way. Shout out to Slamdance. But and since then, there have been movies that have been, and I mean, if they have a flop, like if it's cheap, it doesn't matter that much if you have a flop, as opposed to when Disney releases The Lone Ranger, which I think was a fun film, but it cost $250 million. So
Yikes.
it's just going to bleed out money.
I actually had what class was it for? I don't know. I took a class. It was visual rhetoric. I think it was visual rhetoric. But I had to make an argument about like making a graph and explaining my thesis, right? I mean, I had this argument saying that like the less money that you give filmmakers, the more creative they're allowed to be, because it forces them to be more creative to find ways to make it work.
You kind of have to be. And I mean, to be fair, there is a limit to a point, because there's some things that people do to cut budgets are dumb. It's like Evil Dead. Sam Raimi with the Evil Dead changed how we look at horror, because he was able to accomplish so much with almost nothing.
Yep.
And part of that was like they changed how gore worked in horror movies, because they're like, we can't afford fake blood. And they're like, well, the old movies used to use like Caro syrup, but we can't use that now because it's in color and it worked in black and white. So they mixed Caro syrup with coffee grounds. And so it was kind of like syrupy, but like a little chunky and like this dark oozing color. And like that, which was super cheap and can be done by anyone. Anyone with like $10 can run to the grocery store and get everything they need to make some pretty decent fake blood. And it changed horror.
Yep.
And it still to this day holds up. On the other hand, like they made everyone sleep in that cabin. That rundown cabin. Like they made like everyone working on Evil Dead had to sleep in that rundown cabin. And they're all like sharing rooms and sleeping on the floor, and all the windows were broken, and like everybody got sick, and like that should have been handled better. We shouldn't sacrifice the health of your crew to make a movie. But it's fantastic. And the things people are able to do with low budgets and the ways people are able to innovate. Did you see Upgrade?
I have seen Upgrade, yeah.
Upgrade, finding out, because I saw that movie back when MoviePass was a thing. I saw I saw it with MoviePass, and there was no one in the theater, and I looked it up and I found out it only made less than $20 million at the box office. And I'm like, oh man, this is a huge bummer, because it's a good movie and it looks fantastic. And then I found out it only cost $3 million to make.
Yeah.
And it only cost $3 million to make. So like it was successful. It was decently profitable. But looking at it, like it's so just stunning to look at.
You know who made that, right?
It's Lee Whannell. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
I think it's Whannell. Do you know what he's done though?
He went on to do The Invisible Man earlier this year.
Yeah, but he also wrote Saw with James Wan, and Saw was actually a short film. Yeah, and Saw was a short film that Lionsgate saw at Sundance, and they're like, "We will give you guys money to make this into a feature," and that's how they got their start. Yeah.
No, another I think, and I'm just going to shout this out because anyone listening to this that is interested in filmmaking, especially independent filmmaking, I think needs to watch this. But the movie Dave Made a Maze. It's directed by Bill Watterson, not the Calvin and Hobbes Bill Watterson, a different one. but it's about a guy, like there's a girl comes home from a business trip and finds out that her boyfriend like built a cardboard maze in the living room, but it's actually this vast labyrinth and there's like a cardboard minotaur. So they go in there to get him out because he's trapped in this maze. And it is a testament to the power of independent filmmaking. Like they have it's just cardboard. Like the whole movie is cardboard that they just set up in a dude's apartment to make this movie, but it is incredible. And the level of just innovation and whimsy that you find just from people walking around across cardboard sets all set up in the same living room, and how the scale they're able to make this film on such a small budget is...
I'm looking at some of the set photos right now. Dude, that's crazy.
Oh, yeah. No, it is absolutely incredible what they were able to accomplish with that film. And it was literally just a guy grabbing all the cardboard he could and making crazy shit with it. And it's such a good movie.
Dave Made a Maze.
Dave Made a Maze by Bill Watterson, not the Calvin and Hobbes one, a different one.
Cool. And it premiered at Slam Dance.
It did. It is also a Slam Dance. It was the year before I started working at Slam Dance. So had I been at Slam Dance a year earlier, I would have seen the premiere, and I'm sad that I missed it. But
Nick Thune is in it?
Yeah, Nick Thune's the main guy.
Oh, dude, I saw him live at Wise Guys.
He's a fun... I like his comedy. I wish that he did more acting. Like, the only other thing I've really seen him in outside of Dave Made a Maze is he has like an unnamed, like, 15-second role in Venom, which was okay. It was all right.
He's credited as Beardo at Bar.
Yep, that is. He is a dude at a bar with a beard. That is accurate.
That's cool, and I'll check that out. I'll add that to my list. I had no idea that was a movie. I didn't know that he actually acted either.
Yeah, and he's done some like TV roles here and there, but he hasn't done a whole bunch that I have seen.
That's cool. But, okay, let's move on, shall we?
Yes,
okay.
Let's move.
Okay, what actually inspired you to get into like comic books and writing in general?
So if I were to describe my career path in a single word, it would probably just be privilege. I got real lucky with who I know and how I've kind of been able to go about things. So growing up, I liked writing. My mom would make me write book reports, and for me reading books, she'd make me write book reports and then make me rewrite them until they were better. So I was always a good writer because she made me do that, but I never really considered it viable. When I was first starting out at college, I had a decently successful Tumblr blog that got like low 5-figure following. And so I did a lot of work with that, which then led to my aunt married a film producer who became familiar with some of my writing and asked me to look at a script asked me to look at a pilot script he was working on, which then I sent back way bigger notes than I think he was expecting. He's like, hey, can you take a look at this? And I just sent back pages of notes. And so they changed the script a lot based on what I said, which was an awesome feeling. It's an awesome feeling. But that show got picked up. That was extinct. We went for 10 episodes and then got canceled in the most bizarre way possible, with the station releasing a press release that was like, hey, we're not actually concerned about ratings. We're concerned about whether a show is good for our audience, and we're canceling this, which is like a weird big slap to the face. But so I worked on that, and I got that job entirely because I was sort of funny on the internet, but I got that job entirely because my aunt married a film producer, and he became familiar with my stuff just from being Facebook friends with me. And then I transitioned from that into marketing work because my mom has done a lot of marketing work, and someone asked her if she could work on some stuff for her, and she's like, oh, I'm pretty busy right now, but my son just finished working on a TV show if you want to talk to him. And they're like, yeah, okay. And that's how I got my first marketing job, and I kind of went from there. So I just got very lucky. I got very lucky very quickly, very many times. And so it was never something. I always liked writing. It was never something that I ever thought about doing as a career until I was. So I'm very fortunate in that way that I didn't have to ever look that hard to find opportunities. The comic book writing is the thing where I've kind of mainly had to, where I've had to do the most legwork, and that mainly because there was a Strange Romance. There was a comic anthology that was offering to match people up with artists, and I pitched to that, and it was a short story called Everything That Isn't an Elephant about lesbians and rock monsters, and they liked it enough to let me write it. So that was the main thing, was just finding an anthology that was willing to match me up with someone, and have kind of gone from there. Now I know enough people that when I am wanting to pitch something, I have kind of artists that I'm comfortable working with. But really, most of my writing career has just been me being lucky enough to know the right people. And I am very grateful for that.
And have you had moments where you weren't so lucky?
I mean, definitely yes. There has been, so I talked before about kind of like some failures that have changed everything from that step forward. My first freelance marketing job, to be fair, it wasn't entirely my fault. The thing that they were wanting was not possible. They wanted a 3 to 4 minute video, and they wanted me to include some clips that they wanted me to write footage that incorporated clips that they had. And then they sent me like 24 minutes of footage. And I'm like, how much of this do you want in there? And they're like, we want all of it in there. So it wasn't actually possible. Like, they wanted me to write a 3 to 4 minute video that included 24 minutes of footage plus other stuff. But what I did do was so bad. It was so bad that they they sent me an email and they're like, this isn't how any of this works, and this isn't how the industry works. And it was, I felt awful, and I never worked with that client again. So since then I've done better, but there has been a lot of things where I have just messed up things, and that's how you learn, and it's good. But because I kind of got thrust into like freelancing full time while trying to find a job, it was extra tension. And I mean, part of it is rejection is just part of this. So I have, comics especially, I have pitched, the comics that I've actually made is like less than a third of the things that I've been like, hey, let me do this. And so the most common response I get with comics especially is no. And sometimes I'll be like, can you tell me why? And sometimes they're like really nice about it. And they're like, this just doesn't seem like a good fit. And sometimes they're like, well, we think that you suck. And once I actually got accepted to be in an anthology and I got ghosted by the editor of the comic anthology because they just hated what I was doing. So I submitted one thing and they're like, we like this, but can you kind of, move a little bit more in this direction? And then, so I did another draft and they're like, not like that. And we went back and forth for a little bit, of me like rewriting and then just being like, you're really not understanding what we're talking about. And eventually they just stopped talking to me. And a few months later, I saw the anthology get like the press release put out for when they were releasing it. My name was not on it, and that was a big bummer, getting ghosted by an editor because they just were not feeling. They're like, we thought we could work with you, but we've changed our minds.
Yeah,
so rejection.
That's a slap in the. That's just a slap in the face.
Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, and we were struggling. So I was kind of like at peace with it. But the moment I saw that press release go out, like it just hit me in the gut. Just being, I'm like, oh, this is real. This is real. And it would have been one of the highest profile things I had worked on. So that sucked. But a lot of it, I mean, rejection is a thing that you have to deal with if you're working creatively, not just because, especially, I mean, with like film and comics where you need other people to help you make things.
Yeah.
And so you have to be like, hey, help me make this. But it's also a thing where it's like, hey, you're putting a piece of yourself out there and you're like, hi, I tore off a little piece of my soul and I made it look pretty. Here you go. And like some people are going to look at this and be like, I don't care. And you just got to take it. And so, I mean, rejection is always a factor of any creative pursuit. But yeah, getting ghosted by an editor sucked. That was awful. And the artist I was working on was working on another story. So then I feel bad because then there's also an artist that I'm working on who I'm letting down, who is supposed to be getting paid because of this. But they also were working on another story in the same anthology that ended up going forward. And so they would like message me and be like, hey, so like we're getting a lot of this, like, we've been getting a lot of notes and everything about this. Have you heard anything lately? And I'm like, I don't think they're calling back.
How do you handle the rejection?
I mean, the main thing is that I have gotten to a point in regards to my mental health where my self-esteem has gotten low enough that it's bent all the way back around and become confidence, which is like surprisingly effective. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but rejection has stopped. Like I've gotten to the point where like if I send you something, like I'm gonna send out a pitch and I'm like, this is probably awful. They're probably gonna hate it. And so if they come back and they're like, we hate this, I'm like, yeah, I mean, okay. But anything else, anything beyond that, if they're like, hey, we like this, we want to use it, or even if they're like, hey, this is pretty cool, but not a good fit, I'm like, wait, what? Seriously? So I think it's just that I've lowered my standards for success so low that anything that isn't an outright rejection feels great.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think you kind of have to do to a point because I mean, otherwise people aren't going to stop saying no to you.
Yeah.
They're not going to just stop. Like, you're not going to get to a point where they just suddenly are like, yeah, I mean, everything you want to do now is okay. And I mean, if you ever do get to that point, that's probably not great because a lot of the times you need people to tell you no.
No, I agree. I think for me, with rejection is more like, I don't know. I kind of take like a night off and just watch a movie. I'm like, one day I will get to this.
Later.
Later. It's like a nice feasting of McDonald's and a beer or something. The most unhealthy thing you could probably do. But sometimes you gotta treat yourself, and if you get through rejection, you deserve a treat.
Here's my thing though: is McDonald's has stopped serving root beer, so like, what's even the point?
I mean, fruit beer is your drink to go to. They have Powerade. I think about Powerade's my
they
second
have
go-to.
Powerade. That's true. I just like McDonald's used to be a go-to comfort food for me, and then like they stopped serving root beer. I'm like, whatever I was having, I always wanted because they had Barks root beer, which is one of the best root beers.
You don't like A&W?
I mean, I like A&W. There's difference. So I worked in the soda. I managed like a candy and soda shop for like 2 years, and so I've drank a lot of root beer. And the thing I like about Barks is a lot of like the mainstream root beers, because now I'm sounding like some sort of root beer hipster. A lot of the mainstream root beers are like really into vanilla. They're like, we're going to use a lot of vanilla in this. And Barks shows a little restraint. It pulls back the vanilla and leaves a little more kick to it. And I appreciate that. But I mean, I appreciate other root beers. I'm not some sort of root beer monogamist where I only drink the one, but
So it's not like Coke versus Pepsi? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, Pepsi is, first of all, Coke isn't even a cola. It's not even a cola. So I don't even know, like, what's the better cola? I'm like, Pepsi, because Pepsi's actually a cola. Coke's not even a cola. So, no, I mean, when it comes to those, I mean, I'll drink Coke. But when it comes to Coke versus Pepsi, there is a right answer. And it's the one that is actually a cola.
That's fair. I recently got onto Pepsi, so
It's not that Pepsi is the best cola. There's some very good colas out there. But Pepsi, I think, is very good. I appreciate Pepsi a lot.
I like it a lot. Okay, well, let's start wrapping this up because I bet you have to go soonish.
Oh yeah,
yeah. We've been talking for a bit.
we've been talking for a bit. It'll be good. No, my wife just came home with the baby, so I will go say hi to them in a minute.
Yeah, we can start wrapping this up.
Yeah,
do. Happy Monday, man.
It's Monday. Oh, it's Monday. I don't even know what day of the week it is ever anymore. Something will just happen and I'll be like, oh, what? It's this day? I'm so confused all the time.
Sorry, my backlight. See, lighting. Let's go back to lighting.
Oh, yeah. See? That's.
I'm like, I have a light that I just don't ever set up.
That's fair.
But, okay. Sir Brogan, how do you hope you can inspire others?
Here's my main thing. If people take one thing away from me, if anyone's like listening to me and they're like, I really want to be a writer, the first thing you got to do is you have to write. And I mean, there's so much about being in the right place and the right time and all of those things, which is true, but you're never going to get there if you're not writing. And I know so many people, they're like, I want to be a writer. And if and they like, but they don't write ever. So the main thing is you just got to write. And I hope that people listening to this know that the most important part of writing is writing. So I hope that I'm able to inspire people to actually make stuff, and also to be cool sucking, because you have to suck at stuff before you can not suck at stuff. So don't worry about it. Just keep
How,
doing stuff, and you'll get better.
so I guess the main question is like, how well can you suck at sucking?
This well, that's the thing, because sucking isn't even like it's not
And
even a a result. It's like a lifestyle. Like you have to be committed to being bad at things, and the more committed you are to being bad at things, the better you're going to be. Yeah,
dude, that's a cool mindset. It's kind of a weird mindset, and like it's not in like the sexual way, but like you don't want to suck that way unless you want to. But
what?
it just got weird.
Um, yeah, but it's no. That's the thing. You gotta if you want to make art, you have to actually make art,
Yeah.
and you have to also make things that may not be very good. Um, and the thing that you will learn is that eventually things will become less terrible. And also that people will have different expectations of what is good than you do. And so
Yeah.
sometimes you will do something and you're like, I'm not really feeling this. And people will think it's the greatest thing ever. And sometimes people will think that something is just okay. And you're like, this is the best thing I've ever done. So, I mean, you just got to make stuff and you got to keep putting yourself out there. And there's not too much of a, like, you can't be too concerned with perfectionism because otherwise you're never going to get anything done.
Yeah. What's like the worst movie that you've seen or comic book that you've read that you've actually learned from?
Oh, man. Um, I mean, I think that if you're not learning from bad art, you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
Um, and I think if you're not learning from bad art, you're not paying attention because there is something. And if you're wanting to make stuff, it's not enough to just like enjoy things. You have to, if you're wanting to make movies, you have to look at movies like a butcher looks at a slab of meat. And you have to be completely ready to just and go in there and figure out exactly what makes it tick and exactly how it how it works and how to take it apart and put it back together. And so it is a complicated thing, but you can't let yourself get content to just like sit there and enjoy it. And when you're doing that, I feel like you when you're putting yourself in a mindset where you're looking to learn from everything you consume, you at that point have an opportunity to learn from everything. Um, but if I had to pick one one bad movie that I've learned something from, I'll just tell you because I watched it this morning. Spawn, 1997. Because I watched it this morning, and it was like, and my wife was talking to me, and she was like kind of weirded out because I was like super energetic from watching this terrible movie because I just was blown away by all of the things that I learned from this not good movie. And there's a couple of things. First of all, John Leguizamo is a champion. He's in this ridiculous movie, and he is committed entirely. And I'm imagining him like very serious when they're like on set. And the director's like, okay, in this next scene, you're gonna pull this maggot covered piece of pizza out of a garbage can, and you're gonna like just shove the whole thing into your mouth in one bite. And then we're going to go on to the scene where you're in a skimpy cheerleader outfit. And I'm just imagining him being very serious, be like, yeah, okay. And every bit that he's in is watchable. Every bit. I mean, it's not always like fantastic. It's not exactly inspiring. It's still not a great movie. But he is so committed to this movie in ways that the rest of the crew and cast are not. So commitment is a big deal. And you can make a bad thing memorable just by not being afraid to go like fully crazy with it.
Yeah.
Also, don't use CGI if you don't have to. That movie was super expensive, and a lot of it was entirely unnecessary CGI. Where they're like, "Okay, we're gonna drop some acid, and we're gonna use CGI to make the acid glow." And it's yeah,
I need to
it's a
watch it.
bad.
Is it streaming on something?
So it is the reason I watch. So I just got Peacock because of my internet. So I get free Peacock TV from CenturyLink, and it is available on CenturyLink, but only for the next like 3 days. Which is why I watched it. I'm like, if I'm going to watch this, this is my window. But it's on Peacock currently. It won't be by the time this episode is released. But that's where I watched it, and hopefully it will go somewhere after that. I'm not going to suggest you should like buy it.
I think it's on HBO Max.
It might be.
I think. Don't quote on me on that. Oh no, I'll look into it later.
There's a lot of content shared between Peacock and HBO Max right now.
Do you have HBO
And
Max?
I do not.
Dude, I like it. And some people have issues with it, but like seeing how much movies they have on there, like how many movies are on there. Mwah. Plus the
Yeah.
TCM. I like the Turner Classic movies. So
Oh yeah. Well, I'm just the amount of old like Looney Tunes cartoons they have on there.
yeah.
Because I have Disney Plus. When my wife was pregnant, somebody gave us a 3-year subscription to Disney Plus as a baby shower gift, which is like great. But it's a so they have some of the old cartoons, but they kind of like there's kind of a slow filter. So they started out with like maybe like 30 of them, which I immediately watched, and then they're like every like month or two they'll be like, here's another 3. And when I saw how many of the old Looney Tunes shorts they launched HBO Max with, I was very, very intrigued. So,
Yeah. I haven't watched any of those. I probably will fall asleep. That's not my like main forte necessarily, but
that's fair. You're too good for 80-year-old cartoons.
it's not. I mean, it's like I don't know. It's more like background. It's like Impractical Jokers. I love that show, but I'm not gonna like watch it religiously. You know,
Okay.
like I'll just put it in the background, and if like I look up from my phone or whatever, and it's on, like I'll watch it. It's the same thing with Looney Tunes, or I don't know. Plus, I'm not like a huge cartoon kind of
Okay.
guy.
Okay.
But Space Jam is on there, and like I almost watched Space Jam exclusively because I watched the Michael Jordan docuseries.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I have to watch Space Jam now because like they built like a whole basketball court on the set just so we could practice. I'm like, what? And like he would like have all these players go over after his day of shooting. He's like pulling like long ass days for the movie. And then he'd stay up till like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night to play basketball and then wake up at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning to be on set again. Like, it's so crazy.
Space Jam is a weird movie.
Yeah, it's pretty. If I think it's good, it's pure. It's based purely on nostalgia. Like,
oh yeah, no, nostalgia power is intense. Nostalgia is a powerful tool, and I know this because anytime I give a bad review to a movie from like the late '90s on Letterboxd, you comment about how sad it makes you.
Yeah. Dude, there's some like you have Twitter, of course. I have Twitter.
I have Twitter.
There's a Twitter account called like Letterbox Reviews or Insane Letterbox Reviews, and just like some of the stuff that people post on there, it's like you guys are stupid.
People are weird.
Yeah,
people are so weird.
All right, let's tie this up with one last question.
Yes.
I think you might have touched on it just a little bit, but one piece of advice that has stuck to you throughout the years, and how do you apply it?
Piece of advice. I think Neil Gaiman's "Make Good Art" speech is something that I listen to on a semi-regular basis. It was a commencement speech that he gave, and it was like, when life is insane, you just got to make art. And I I appreciate that a lot. Also, On Writing by Stephen King is, I think, the most meaningful book that I have ever read. Just because, I mean, it's a book about writing, but the book is just like, here's something from my life. Also, just get off your ass and do it. And the whole thing, and he's like a bit, he's like, here's half a page on grammar. I don't really care. Just go write. And so On Writing, just how effectively King in that book is able to be like, you just gotta get off your butt and do it, is I think the meaningful thing is that you just have to do it. So that has actually, hearing that in a way that like impacted me, completely changed my life. And I went from someone that liked writing but didn't really do it to someone that writes all the time.
Have you listened to the audiobook of that on
I have
writing?
not.
I have it, and he is the one reading it, and so it's like he's talking to you, but the whole book, you kind of touched on it. It was like he's like, like, I don't care about grammar. Like, here's how you do it, but like, I don't care. Go write. Kind of a mindset, but like the whole book is also very meta because he tells a story about how to write and how it still applies. Just go out there and write.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, by the time it's done, you're like, holy shit, you just told a story about your life. But like, it was all about writing, like how to write, like just go out there and do it. And I don't know. Yes, I do agree. That book is very, very good. And I would recommend
Very
it.
good.
Even if you're not about writing, just like if you like Stephen King at the very least, check it out. It's kind of a nice insight into how he comes up with these ideas.
Yeah. Now that he's sober. It's very, very different creative process now that he's sober. Good for him.
Plus, he has like all the money in the world to not like worry about anything. The fact he keeps coming out with books, I'm like, dude, I don't know how you do it. Like, it's like one book after another after another.
He just writes every single day.
And his kids write. And dude, and like, it's funny too. I read the latest book I read from him was The Outsider. Because I finished the HBO show and I'm like, I have to read the book. Like, I want to see how it compares.
Of course.
And it's a pretty great adaptation from the book. But there's a part in the book where he's talking about The Shining and how he hates this character is like, oh, it's not as good as The Shining or as Kubrick's Shining, but Kubrick's other movie's better. And I'm just like, there he is throwing a stab at Kubrick.
He's got some weird. I don't know. He was really sad about that movie.
Yes, he was.
Which is weird because it made so many people so happy. And if I saw something, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't, because I've never had a film adapted by Stanley Kubrick, who by all accounts was not a pleasant person to work with. So it's it's a bummer.
Yeah, well, I think Dr. Sleep tried to tie up a lot of those issues. Nick, it's weird. I don't know.
It's like a sequel to the book and also a sequel to the movie.
Yeah. Well, there's that. Then like also like, have you read the book, The Shining?
I've not read the book. No.
Okay. Well, the way the movie ends is not the way the book ends at all. I mean, that's a huge difference. But have you seen Dr. Sleep?
I haven't. I need to watch it. So it came. I wanted to see it because one of my friends is in it, and I was like super excited because it's like the biggest thing they've ever done. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. But it came out right around the time that my daughter was born. Oh. And so I didn't go to movies for a bit. And then, so the day it was released on home video, I went out and bought it, and I still haven't watched it.
Watch the director's cut.
Okay.
Just, I mean, it adds a lot more to it. But the way that movie ends is pretty much how the first book ends.
Okay.
And like is it Mike Flanagan? Yeah, Mike Flanagan somehow connects both universes to please both fans of the book and fans of the movie, and still make the movie the Dr. Sleep movie a sequel to both, even though it was intended for the book specifically.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
Yeah. It's high on my list of things to check out. And I just haven't done it yet, and I feel terrible. Sorry, Alex, if you're watching this, but it's a bummer.
Would recommend it, but all right. Where can people find you, sir?
So you can find me on the various social medias, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, at Robot Eats Dino, or on my website, roboteatsdinosaur.com. So
I love it. It's very simple, but it's totally you.
Yeah. There's a reference to something. I just remember what. When I was like 14, I'm like, if I ever have a company, this is what I'm going to call it. And it was a reference to something. And now I'm an adult and I have a company and I don't remember what it's about, but it's called Robot Eats Dinosaur. So
there you go. You can follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd. I don't promote Letterboxd often. It'd be cool if we got sponsored by them. Probably will never be, but
I don't know if they have the money to do
not.
that.
It's very independent.
It is. It's super indie, and which I'm so grateful for, because any other site of that caliber would have been bought by Facebook like 3 years ago. So
yeah, screw that. No, if you don't have Letterboxd and you're a fan of movies, like definitely give it a try. It's nice to log movies at least too. You don't have to rate them. You can just like keep a diary. It's nice.
Yeah.
That's how I figured out. I watched over 70 movies during quarantine.
Oh yeah, no, it's nice. I can just pull up. I've definitely watched more than we'll see. So I'm on track this year to hit like 500 movies.
Jeez.
Which is about what I hit last year, but a little bit about what I hit last year, but a little bit less. But so far, just features, not including like shorts. Since my office closed, I have watched 93 movies, not including the backlog of like 30 movies I have yet to review. So,
son of a gun. I love it. But all right. Brogan, thank you for coming on. It was kind of last second on my end, but I appreciate it.
Oh, no. It was great. You're the first. So I've been invited to be on a podcast multiple times. You're the first person to actually follow through.
Yes.
So it's been nice. I hope that I did okay. I've had plenty of people be like, "Hey, do you want to be on my podcast?" And I'm like, "Sure, when?" And they're like, and then it never happens. So when you're like, "Hey,"
it goes like that. I usually work with Google Calendars, so it's easier for me to like line it up and see when it is on my phone and what my schedule's like. I'm like, I can answer this right away and set it up all from my phone. It's nice.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's
wonderful.
nice. Anyway, okay. Make sure you check out Brogan's stuff. Make sure you follow him. Make sure you follow me if you want. And yeah, Brogan, happy Monday.
Happy Monday. This has been fun.
Oh yeah.
Have an enjoyable rest of your Monday. And rest of the week even. Chaz, you've earned it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Talk to you later.
All right.